All right. So, some of you may have heard my story about, it's been 8, 9 years ago now that I had the epiphany that I was not in control of my own business. So it was, like I say, 8, 9 years ago. I got a phone call the week before Thanksgiving, the week of Thanksgiving, which is our busiest time of the year. And I got a phone call from an employee who was letting me know when she would and wouldn't be available to work that week. And I remember sitting on the other end of the phone with my mouth gaping open, thinking, what the heck? Who is in charge here? And then I distinctly remember kind of laughing at myself, thinking, well, clearly not you. And that is really, I mean, it sounds so simple, but that's really when I had that aha moment of, I got to change things. This is horrible. I am clearly not driving the ship. So anyway, was at that moment, everything changed for me. I kind of drew this imaginary line in the sand and thought, it's going to all change here. And it did. It really did. And so I'll be talking to you about, kind of how I turned my culture around to where it wasn't me playing the victim to me being able to run it from another state and feel totally in control. Well, as in control as you can feel with humans running your operations. So, um, so it turns out that, honestly, I wasn't alone. There's a study that shows that 43% of entrepreneurs are not happy. And interestingly enough, that's 15% higher than people who work for another company. But I still think that 43% being happy, I think I said are not happy, but 43% being happy, that's not good. I mean, we're supposed to be pursuing the American dream, and 57% of us are not happy. And I was absolutely in that 57%. So the truth that I learned 7, 8, 9 years ago, I lose track now, was that I really was the one to blame. Okay, so when I work with people, what I hear is basically those damn employees. Why don't they do this? Why don't they do this? And I get it. I understand why we blame the employees, because they're the ones that don't show up or no call, no show or whatever. They're the ones that do shoddy work, maybe rushing through a job, and then you're left to try to make it up to the client. I understand why we get this relationship with our employees. However, what I discovered was when I was on the other end of that phone call, I had to ask myself, why would she even think she could call and demand these things? I had set that up. And so that's the truth, is that whenever you're having employee issues, you're going to have to step back and look at your systems and what is allowing this to happen. So we're going to go over all of that. But at the end of the day, we're the people who hired them. We're the people who train them, and then the people who keep them. So we're going to talk a lot about that today. But the great thing is, because it really does start with us, we can fix it. It is totally fixable. Now, I'm not saying you will never have any more employee problems in your whole life. That's not true. But we can absolutely anticipate a lot of it and then have systems for it. So I'm going to take you on a journey with one of my very first clients named Anne. And she is a good friend, was letting me make fun of her and what she was doing wrong and how we fixed it. And anyway, so sometimes it helps to kind of see it from an outside perspective, and then maybe you see a little bit of yourself in that. So let's talk about what her business looked like early on. She had about 25% of the staff back then that she has now, and yet she had lots more employee problems. Her attendance policy was, did they show up? So while she had policies and procedures, which is awesome because not everybody does, she didn't follow them. And so it was kind of a crapshoot on her. Really, it was like roll call. Were they there? Check. Yes. And if they weren't, it was like, are they going to call or what? So it wasn't good. Her training was insufficient. Now, she had a training program, which again is better than some people because she actually had a program, not just a kind of fly-by-night thing. But what she found was she had a lot of inconsistent results. So we'll talk about that. The level of quality was questionable at best. She hated answering the phone, got lots of quality complaints, and she had to figure out a way to have more consistent quality. And then lastly, attitude issues. The employees were absolutely in control. So if any of this sounds familiar, you're in the right place. We're going to go over that, and I hope I give you some hints of how to fix it. All right. So policies and procedures. Now, the funny thing about policies and procedures is you actually have to follow them. And that's the hardest part. Because many times we get so caught up in the day-to-day of our business, we don't even realize that we're not following our policies and procedures. So I'm going to share with you what Anne was doing, and maybe a few things will sound familiar. Okay, so on the positive side, she did have policies, and she, had everything written down. The employees signed them whenever she had a new employee. She reviewed the policies. And so she thought she was doing what she was supposed to do because she had policies. She had them signed. She had them reviewed. But when she came to me, she was frustrated because she felt like the employees were just kind of running all over her and that she didn't have control and like they were taking advantage of her. She felt like she was too nice. And, all of these things were absolutely true. Now, Anne was a mom. So I told her to think of being in Walmart and think of a time when she's in Walmart and she sees a parent-child interaction. And I bet you guys have seen this, where the kid is asking for a toy or candy or whatever, and increasingly pushes. Like, the first, no, we're not going to do that. Then the kid's behavior, steadily gets worse and worse. And then you see that parent saying, if you don't stop that, I'm going to, they have they threaten, and then there's a consequence. But I asked Ann, so what usually happens? And you guys might be answering the same thing. What usually happens is nothing. Like the parent makes the threats and says what's going to happen, and then generally nothing happens. It's like the parent just kind of tries to sweep it under the rug and pretend like those threats were never made. So Anne realized that. So she was like, yeah, I've seen that happen all the time. The parent never does anything. Those kids are running the show. So I'm a straight shooter, and I would propose back to Anne, do you see any similarities here? Can you see how policies resemble like the rules that you're trying to instill with a child? Now, many times I'm not the only one who equates the like management employee relationship with a parent-child relationship. I mean, like I say, I'm not alone on this, and it is not to belittle the employee in any way, but I'm saying that just as kids need boundaries and rules, so do employees. And those threats you make are the consequences. So if you have a policy that says you miss X number of times, unplanned absence, then this happens. That's just like saying, if you do that one more time, this happens. And the reason that I spend time trying to get you to see that is that you probably have observed. I had a family member who absolutely let their kid run all over them. And it was kind of easy to see from my outside view of, oh my gosh, I can tell you exactly why they're doing that. And so hopefully you can look at your situation and see if you do any of that, the empty threats and the no follow through. Because if you do, you are breeding that kind of relationship where you're teaching the employees to push you over and over. They're going to push the limits just like kids will push the limits. So here's how we fix Anne's problems. Let's see. Sorry, I have notes, so I stay on track. I'm the worst about staying on track. We tore apart her policy and procedure manual, and we rewrote the policies with the best employees in mind. Okay, so I want you to think of if you're having trouble with your policies and procedures, I want you to think of your best employees and the way that your policies are written now. Could your best employees make it? Like as stay employed as far as absences go, quality issues, breakage, whatever. And if they can't, then you need to rewrite them so that you can keep your best employees employed. These are the people that you want to keep. Because basically what you would be doing is rewriting your policies and procedures so that they still weed out the underperformers. You don't want to keep everybody. I mean, I understand, especially right now, you may be having the warm body complex where you just want to keep warm bodies. But, as much as it hurts to decrease your production and so forth, and that's a whole nother topic, you are really creating havoc with your company culture when you allow these CD players to stay. All right, you want A players. A players breed more A players coming in. All right, so we also talked about things like earning the cushion. So I'm a big believer of pay for performance, and you're going to hear about that later. But even when it comes to policies and procedures, you can let your employees earn extra. So let's take attendance, for example. In my company, I allow 3 unplanned absences in 6 months. Now, when I hate to even throw out those figures, because I'm not saying you go and adopt this. I am just telling you what I have. And it works for us. But I will tell you that I have in my policy a way that my employees can earn extra allowed absences. Now, here's the thing. When I wrote this into my policies, I did not want everybody to be able to get it. So should I have a C or D player, I don't want them to have all these allowed unplanned absences. I only want to keep my best people. So the way that I wrote it to where it's fair for everyone, because everyone can earn it, it's just not that everyone will earn it. So every single person gets the 3 unplanned absences. My best performers can earn more, and it's based off their quality score. So just for example, if they have a month with a quality score above a 4.75 and they have at least a 50% response rate, they can earn an extra unplanned absence. But the key word is earn. And so, and the reason that I suggested this to Ann and that I came up with it in the first place is because I had an employee who was excellent in every way, but she was a single mom of like 4 or 5 kids. And so as you can imagine, she missed a lot of days. And this was after I'd drawn the line in the sand and said, okay, I'm following my policies. I'm going to be consistent and everything. So I had this great employee. I was going to have to fire. I was going to have to fire her because she missed too many days. And I was thinking, how can I not fire her, but yet not show favoritism? Because I couldn't make an exception for one. I could only rewrite policies to where anybody was eligible. So I did. And I rewrote the policies to say, you can earn extras and here's how. But the magnificent thing about it is that your substandard employees, they're not going to earn the extra because they don't care. They're not willing to put out the work. And so you can still get rid of them with attendance and so forth without feeling like you have no recourse. So I love it. But whatever you do, it has to be fair to everyone. It is crucial that you are not changing the policies depending on if you're short-staffed or if you like the person or if Mrs. Jones is a weekly client and she loves so-and-so. You can't do any of that and breed a culture of trust. And speaking of trust, consistency, so consistency following your policies breeds a culture of trust. And in my opinion, trust is the most important core value that I can have. I have to be able to trust my employees with the money, with the, knowing what we charge, with their client information. They have to be able to trust me that I will not fire them unfairly. I am I am the governor of their livelihood. And so they have to be able to trust me. If they can't trust me, then, it's kind of a two-way street. They're going to start doing things that make me not trust them. So I was the same way with my kids. I always told them, I'm not going to like micromanage all of your activities until you show me that I have to. And I'm the same way with my employees. I check, I verify, I do all of that. Okay. Step number 2 is your training program. So when I met Ann, she did have a training program, but she felt like they would, she would spend the money and time on training, but when they got out, it was like a crapshoot because some of them did great. And some of them, they would get out and almost immediately start getting quality complaints and things like that. So she didn't understand why, I'm investing all this time and money and why do they not work out? So we looked at her current training program, and she did do, really most all the right things. She had a dedicated trainer, a dedicated trainee. Well, they're all dedicated trainees, but they were working on going from dependent to independent. So her trainer would start with demonstrating, and then the next step was the trainee would have hands-on, and the trainer would be watching and giving verbal cues, and they worked that way until the trainee could do the task independently. So that's all really good, but Anne felt like something wasn't right because many of the employees would get out of training and get the quality complaints. So I looked at her structure in the training, and really what was missing were the competency and the consistency parts. So you have to have a strategy. And like I say, for Anne, the problem was consistency because they were getting out, and like I said, it was kind of like a crapshoot that some would have great quality and they seemed to know what they were supposed to do, and some would not. So we looked at the strategy and suggested that instead of having a magic 2-week training timeline, that it's based on competency. So I asked Ann, how did you come up with the 2 weeks? And her answer, like so many of us, was, especially when we're new to this, it was like, well, so-and-so did 4 weeks, so-and-so did 1 week, several people did 2 weeks, so I chose 2 weeks. So you see, it's kind of like just throwing a dart and going 2 weeks or whatever you use. And so I proposed that there isn't a magic timeline. Instead, there's a competency pass-fail. And so we came up with basically requirements, a checklist that has to be accomplished to get out of training. And sometimes that'll take 2 weeks. Sometimes that takes 3 weeks. Sometimes it takes less than 2 weeks. And it varies because it's based on competency and not a timeline. Because training is not a one-size-fits-all. We know that people will learn at different speeds, different ways, and so forth, but yet most of us put a one-size-fits-all stamp on it. So that's what we worked on with Ann, and I would want you to consider, if you're doing that, maybe how you could do that differently. If it's not working, if it's working, leave it alone. All right. Another problem was that, you know, Ann was going from where the trainee was totally dependent to where, you know, less and less verbal cues to where they were independent, but yet some got out and knew what they were doing and some didn't. And so one of the things that I did in my own business was create some consistency. So instead of them doing it correctly one time and saying, check, you know what to do, that could be a fluke. So I suggested to Ann that she do 3 consecutive perfects. So in other words, 3 times consecutively, they show you they know how to do that task. And I add perfectly onto my requirements because our customers expect perfection for the most part. And here's the thing that I know is in training, that's the honeymoon phase. And it is when they're paying the most attention and really soaking it in. And if I water down the requirements in training, then I'm going to get less than that in the real world. Okay, so training, the strategy is to have very, very high expectations. And I like to have the employees check their own work. So they go through and they just completed the task. And of course, the trainer is going to evaluate that task. But I also ask that the trainee has a quality inspection form and they check their own work. So before they tell the trainer, I'm done, it's perfect, have them check their own work. And if you can even go the extra step to have them QA somebody else's work towards the end of training, that's an excellent thing because it does a couple of things for you. It makes them look at somebody else's work with a critical eye, just like some of our clients will do, and just like a field manager would do. But if you have a field manager, she will love that you add this into your training program because what it does is it they can kind of see the human element of it. They can see that it's not real comfortable to point out to your peers the other, or, you know, their errors. The trainers don't, or I'm sorry, the field managers don't love to do that, or you as the owner or whoever. So when you have a trainee inspect somebody else's work and they find something and then they have to approach them and let them know, it gives them kind of an inside feel of what's that like. And, you know, I mentioned this, training time is going to vary. Because it's competency-based and not time-based, you will find people who get out super early, some that take the 2 weeks or whatever your training program normally is, and then you'll have a few that will get out later. And I think something just popped up in chat, and I'm going to tell you, you can sure put them in chat or put them in Q&A, and then at the very end, I'm going to answer questions. But I do encourage you, as things come up, go ahead and put it in there so you don't forget. And I will not answer them till the end because I get sidetracked. But yes, training time will vary. And know that this training will show you that what you're trying to teach them is not for everyone. So I absolutely find that we make some hiring decisions and then we find out in training that this isn't the right job for them, or they're not the right fit for us, you know, either way. That's part of training. And I'm going to tell you that if you expect more, you will get more. And I remember back when I told Ann, you know, you need to do this and this and this. And, you know, she was like, nobody's ever going to get out of training. And I said, you know what? Try it and see. Nothing is, whenever you put things in place, you know, as long as you warn your employees, if you want to, but I know that I have absolutely put things in place, such as new training programs or pay for performance or this or that. And I've said, we're going to give it a good try. We're going to believe that it's going to work. And if I have solid evidence that it doesn't, then we'll re-examine it. So don't be afraid to raise the bar. And then if you find that it just doesn't work, then you can always change it. But the key is, if you're going to raise the bar, you can't raise the bar and go, you know, this probably isn't going to work, but we're going to try this anyway, blah, 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 blah. You know, you really kind of have to keep that within your highly trusted management staff. Because like, you can't let a trainee go, no, oh, we've got a new training system, don't know if it's going to work, blah, 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 blah. You have to act absolutely confident, even if it's the first time out of the gate. You just do. But if you expect more, you're going to get more. All right. Step number 3 is weeding out for cultural fit. And I used to actually have this all inside of training, but this is a huge thing, because if you don't have the right person, I don't care what kind of programs or policies or, you know, whatever. Well, your policies will weed people out, but that'll be later. So we actually test for cultural fit big time, and we do it early. So what was happening with Ann is, you know, she was basically disappointed in the people who were hired and felt like, you know, somehow she didn't interview correctly and they got the wrong people. And here's the thing that most of us know about interviews. People lie. Some people are much better at lying and performing than others. And sure, we could all be better at our interviewing skills, I'm sure, but I came to terms with the fact that I'm not the FBI. I don't necessarily know how to flush out every inconsistency that somebody's telling me. I mean, sure, I have all of the open-ended questions and I look for pauses and I do all those things, but I came to terms with the fact that I am probably going to make mistakes hiring, and Ann absolutely made mistakes hiring. And so the strategy is going to be that we're going to test for our problems early on. So here's one of the things that Ann said was that, all right, I've got down, you know, how to be consistent and get better quality when they get out of training. But sometimes people get through and their quality is okay, but their attitude is terrible. And it actually, they get through training and I actually don't like them. Like, I don't want them representing my company. But here I am out, you know, a month, 2 months, 3 months, and I find this out. And so Ann was still very frustrated with all the time and money spent on the hiring and the training, and then, you know, your clients getting used to them for a few times, and then only to discover, oh my gosh, they're going to talk back to me when I'm just trying to bring up a client complaint or something like that. So Anne's issue was primarily with attitude when she had to correct somebody. And so what she was finding is, let's say a customer complained, and maybe it was a really mild complaint, but when she would go talk to the employee would like flip out and be like, I cleaned that. I didn't do that. So-and-so did that. And just the whole blame game and, not accepting responsibility and all that. And so we talked about how you can test for that early on. So what I said was, in training, and I actually learned this from a friend of mine who, Derek Christian, who mentioned this idea, and I think he just mentioned it in passing, and I was like all over it. But what we do is pick the hardest task in training, and you try to test for this early on. So my trainers know to test like day 1, 2, for sure no further than 3, we're testing for attitude. Now the trainee doesn't know this, of course, but what we do is we pick the hardest task, which in the cleaning world is cleaning a shower. It can have soap scum, it can be very physical. I mean, some of them are breeze, but some of them aren't. Anyway, so for you all that are in lawn care or whatever, be thinking of what kind of your most dreaded, hardest task would be that you could do something similar. But what we do is we have them clean that shower, and then the trainer says to the trainee, oh, you missed a spot. And they point out this imaginary spot, and that's the key. It has to be, they have to have really done a good job on it, like that it's perfect or near perfect. So they point out this imaginary spot that they didn't get and say, I need you to redo it. And here's the thing. This is just, to me, crucial, is if they sit there and they're puzzled and they're like, okay, I don't really see it. And, you can tell that they're questioning it, but they're like, okay, I'll redo it. Those people pass. But if you tell them that they're going to need to redo it because here's this imaginary spot that's not right, and that person cops an attitude with you, which, remember, this is why it's important that it is perfect or near perfect, because you're seeing if they're going to start arguing with you. And so if they cop an attitude and they're like, I don't see anything there, where is it? Or, just they start, it's the tone, it's the arguing. If they start that, then we will let them finish up that house. But either in between jobs or at the end of the day, depending on when it works, we will absolutely let them go. Now, that is hard for people to do because they're thinking warm bodies and I need people. But I can assure you, and I assured Anne, that, listen, that person that just showed you that attitude, you keep them, and 5-6 months down the road, that little bit of attitude they showed you, oh my gosh, it's going to be a huge attitude when they get comfortable with you. And, when does that work out well? It never does. And so when you finally, one of you gets sick of each other, either you finally let them go or they, decide, forget it, I don't like this job, then that same employee that showed attitude in day 1, 2, or 3 is very likely an employee that is going to turn in an unemployment claim, or maybe a false workers' comp claim, or, you know, turn you into OSHA, just anything to create trouble for you. So really think, if you're going to keep somebody that showed you they have a bad attitude, at least do it and be conscious that you are saying, okay, I'm going to keep them, even though I know I shouldn't. Because for me, I would so much rather know what I'm getting, even if that means I'm one less person. At least it's not, you know, I keep referring to Vegas, a crapshoot. At least it's not that. Because you have a ticking time bomb on your hand if you let that person stay. So that's just an example of testing for whatever your core values are. And if you know, a good attitude is one of your core values, then you want to weed that out in training. If one of your core values is team player, you want to do things to test to see if they're a team player in training. And I'm gonna move on from that, but you know, the key lesson is cut them early. They're gonna cause you so much less trouble on day 1, 2, or 3 than 6 months out, because the writing's on the wall. And I truly believe that it is my job as a leader to protect our culture. And, you know, I let my employees know, I mean, you know, the employees that are with me and have been with me, not the newly hired trainees, but I let my employees know we do these things and they are not to let on. And I let them know that I'm not only doing it for me and the company, but I'm doing it for them. That I believe so strongly in our culture and protecting our environment, including them and who they work beside, that we are going to go to these measures. Okay, next is pay for performance. And of course, I love this subject. So Anne was frustrated with the fact that her employees were all getting the same benefits and relatively the same pay. However, some were top performers and some were not. And so she really didn't know what to do to make things basically more fair for the people who are working their butts off. Now, I'll tell you, when I came to this realization in my own company, I had 2 employees that reached their 1-year anniversary about the same time. And back in the old days, what I would do is give a week's vacation after 1 year of employment. So 5 paid days off after they'd been with me a year. But when it came to light that I didn't like it this way was when I had one employee who was a freaking rock star. And, you know, when she hit her 1 year mark and she took her week's vacation and I had to write that check, I didn't have any type of resentment towards it, because I was like, good for her. She works so hard, does a great job, and so forth. But like I said, I had 2 employees that hit that mark about the same time. And the other one, it was back in the day when I kept people longer than I would now. And she had basically survived. We had survived each other that 1 year. And so when she took her 5 days and I had to write her check, I was ticked. I was thinking, you know, she barely keeps from getting fired and I'm writing this week check. And, you know, I had anger around that. And that's when I stepped back and realized I want to pay people based on their performance. Now I understand this is a benefit, but really I've restructured everything. Not only pay and bonuses and things like that, but also benefits and clearly like policies. I talked about that even around performance. And not everybody gets that same blank check. It depends on performance and what we're measuring, because it's not just about quality or attendance. There's all kinds of things you can measure. So I did have a couple of friends that were already doing a paid time off program based on their quality scores. And again, I was all over that. And so that's where we went with Ann, is coming up with a program that people earned their paid days off instead of were given the paid days off. And that whole concept of earned, not given, is kind of the basis of pay for performance. And listen, I have loved pay for performance forever, I think. And I think if you come from a sports background, I know I don't look like I come from a sports background, but I do. And I think if you come from a sports background, you kind of get that, because all the recognition and accolades and, you know, what your heat and all those things are based on your performance. And I have a quick funny story about, before I even did pay for performance, I have a funny story about how I did it with my kids. Really, really early into owning this business, I had my kids and their friends delivering door hangers. And this was back in like 07, 08, when I very first started. And so I had a van. We went to neighborhoods. I dropped kids, you know, 2 kids here, 2 kids here, 2 kids here. Anyway, I think we had 1,500 door hangers to get out that day. And it was a hot day. It was like 100 degrees. And I mean, really, in hindsight, I feel very bad about this. But they were time sensitive. They had the, you know, coupons that were time sensitive, needed to get them out. So we were about 3/4 of the way in, and those kids were dragging. And so anyway, I had promised them a certain amount of pay if we got them delivered. And so here they were ready to take less pay and be done, but I needed those door hangers delivered. So this is the first pay for performance system in my company I can remember. I said, now mind you, they were like 9, 10 years old. I said, okay, so here's what we're going to do. If you stop now, you're going to get this amount of pay versus this pay. But that wasn't enough to motivate them. So then I said, and if you finish and get them all delivered, of course, kids like to go spend their money immediately. So I said, I will take you to Target. You can shop, and then we'll end it with a pool party. And so, you know, those kids who were dragging suddenly had the incentive to do what I needed to get what they wanted. And that is pay for performance in a nutshell. So anyway, it's being creative. Now, we do, in my current business, we definitely will pay based on production, but they absolutely have to hit their quality threshold. Like, you can't just pay on production, which for those of you who pay based on commission, you have to understand that if you have no quality component in there, you are incentivizing them to make more money in less time, which can create some problems. I totally believe in commission, but I also believe in pairing it with a quality threshold, or that percentage can go down. You can absolutely improve attendance by doing things where they can qualify for things with perfect attendance or so forth. There are a number of things that you can do. On our Quality Driven YouTube channel, because I'm kind of running out of time, there are a bunch of things around pay for performance where I talk about individual programs. So if you're interested, you can go look at that. I use a spin wheel and things like that. Pay for performance, there's year-round, like our pay structures year-round. That PTO program that we do is year-round. We do year-round programs based on social reviews and so forth. But then we also do some random things. So if morale is low, or we're getting, bunch of complaints around a certain issue, we'll run certain contests and things around that at certain times of the year. So those are the random ones. So like I say, been a longtime fan. It works if you do it well, but I will say you can't just slap pay for performance on a toxic culture and things just magically work out. It's a higher level of culture to do that. All right, so transparency. Your pay for performance will not work without transparency. So when your employees don't know where they stand as far as, am I in trouble? Am I going to earn a bonus? If they don't know where they stand, then they don't trust the system. So Anne came to me and she was like, okay, I have this pay for performance program, but people aren't excited about it. Like, they're not earning the bonuses, and they're, not earning the paydays off, and and wanted to know why they weren't excited. And so when I looked at her programs, I thought, well, they can't even know if they're going to get the bonus. Like, everything was so hidden that they never knew if they got the bonus or they got that paid day off until they were actually granted it. And there's a problem with that, because you want your employees to be engaged, and you want them to be tracking their bonus, or if they're in trouble, you want them to know exactly where they are in the process, because you need the employee to be in control of whether they achieve that or not. Okay, so it has to be transparent. And so I taught Anne how you can show these quality scores very transparently. Now, in our company, of course, we use QDS, and we put it, it's a scoreboard. We put it right up there. And when I was teaching this, I said, think about in school when you get graded. All right. And let's say that you made an 80% on a test. Now, if that's all you knew, and you thought, oh man, this was a hard algebra test, and an 80%, I mean, I killed it. That was great. If your score is the only one that you know, then, you make your own assumptions. Oh, I did really well, or man, I didn't do that great. You make your own assumptions if that's all you know. But if that teacher told you, okay, here's your grades, you see you got an 80%, but the teacher said, okay, so the class average was an 89%, the highest grade was a 99%, the lowest grade was a 60%, whatever the numbers would figure out to be. But when you get that data, now you're going to feel a little bit differently, or could feel a little differently about that score, because now you know how the class did as an average, and you know what was possible, you know what you did, and you know the lowest score. And so now you're making those decisions about your performance based on other data. And that's what transparency is. And that's what we do with so many things: attendance, bonuses, quality scores, and so forth. We keep a scoreboard. And this is quality driven for those of you who don't use it, but your employees can log in, and depending on if you want them to just see their scores, you can do that, or you can let them see their peers' scores. I do that. I believe in transparency, but I also built a culture where we support each other and we learn from each other. So we really don't have a problem with that. And what it does is, when somebody gets out of training, those quality scores basically will predict their path. They will see if they're towards the top or towards the bottom. And if they care, they're going to want to work up towards the top. So one of the books probably that led me to co-found Quality Driven is 3 Signs of a Miserable Job. And it talks a lot about how, as human beings, we crave to know how we're doing. We crave feedback. It's how we kind of evaluate self-worth in some ways. And so that's why I'm a big believer of transparency, not just in quality scores, but other things. And when you lay everything out, you make it very clear how you excel in the company, and you make it very clear how you go down the dangerous path of possibly getting suspended or fired. Your employee is literally like this picture in a path in the road, and they are making a conscious decision which way they're going. You've laid everything out, and that's how you're building that self-reliant, self-motivated person, by all these steps we've talked about. You have shifted the responsibility from you, management, nagging the employee, to the employee standing at the fork deciding which way to go. Okay, now, my contact got messed up. Celebration, step number 6, the last step. None of this works unless you celebrate the wins. So with Anne, you know, she felt like she wasn't getting enough mileage out of her pay for performance system, and that people weren't that excited about it, and we'd fixed the transparency problem. But what she really hadn't done is to give those attaboys. And again, I'm going to refer to a book. There's a book called Bridges Out of Poverty. And this book talks about the different classes and how we are raised, whether you're in poverty level, middle class, upper class. And I felt like I really got some good understanding of why some people act the way they do, like for instance, if you're trying to coach somebody and they just really overreact and blow up, but most of the time they're just perfectly normal reactions. Some of that is the way they're raised, and I can't go through the book in this class, but I will tell you this, really what was an eye-opener is to think about, not everybody was raised to believe in themselves and to have self-confidence. And so what I have taken on in my company is the role of building people up. And every time somebody makes one of those pay per performance goals, every time they get that great review, all of those things, it is a chance to give those attaboys. And one of the most impactful things that you can do is just praise people in like your staff Facebook or Slack groups. You know, for me, I just copy and paste things that come across in Quality Driven. I take those best comments and I put them in like our private Facebook group. And a lot of times I'll copy and paste it, you know, put it in Canva, and then highlight that employee on our company Facebook page, because I've given them some private recognition and some public recognition. And then I take it a further step and always go and publicly praise them in the staff meeting. And anyway, I've got something later on I will tell you about, like our staff meeting agenda, and I explain my strategy behind that, but it's just taking it one more step. But it is strategic that you praise them. It is great for the employee and it is great for you as the employer. And I really believe that you have built an extraordinary culture when your employees leave your company and they remember the way that you made them feel. When you make them feel important and you're building their self-esteem, they will remember your company and they will talk about you fondly. And here's the thing. Okay, you might think, well, that doesn't do any good, they're gone. But, you know, people still sell your company, they sell your culture. And the thing is, I'm just saying you made an impact. And for me, running a service business isn't all about making money and pleasing clients. I love having a difference in people's lives. And I truly can, even as an absentee owner. All right, so I want you to think about, you know, I talked about in the beginning when I had that employee call me and it was that epiphany and, you know, oh my gosh, to now, if you know much about me, I spend maybe 5 hours a month on my maid service. But that's because I have lots of other things going, but I also don't require it, well, my employees don't require me to be there. And my office manager and VA, they're all remote. So we no longer have anybody in the office putting a thumb on people. Now, I'm not necessarily suggesting you do that. I'm just saying that it can be done where people come in and do what they're supposed to do. And by the way, Anne, I'll let you in on a little secret. Anne was me. I was absolutely my first coaching client. And somehow, through the grace of God, I was able to step outside and see the mistakes that I was making and was able to rework things. So set up those strategies, set up those processes, and I'm hoping that you can find a way to have freedom. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be like me and only be part of your business 5 hours a month. That doesn't mean that, because you know, whenever I talk about this, people are like, well, I want to work more than that. Well, believe me, I work more than that. But what the freedom does is it gives you the choice to be there. There's a big difference between having to be there to make sure things run versus the choice to show up just like as an extra benefit for you and them. So I want you to have that freedom. And feel free to reach out to me if you have questions. Now, I will say, yeah, okay, so I'll switch that in a minute. I'm going to let whoever wants to go, because I'm going to spend about 5 minutes talking about my Level Up class that I have that's 10 weeks long. And what I did for you today was give you a big overview, and it's what I teach when I go and do, you know, at conferences and so forth. That's the higher level overview. But in my Level Up class, it's 10 weeks of breaking down not only all these things, because those were only 6, but really going into things like performance evals and like pay for performance for managers versus field staff and so forth. So if you want to know about that, stay on. Before I start that though, let me see if I plan to answer this afterwards, but let me see what questions I have. Oh, it won't let me until I stop the share. So let me just go through this real quick and then I'll look at those questions. So the Level Up class, it is, because this is what everybody wants to know, it is $9.97 for the 10 weeks. So roughly $100 a webinar session. You get a notebook mailed to you. You get 10 weeks of live webinars. You get homework. And I think more than anything, what you get is accountability. So in the notebook, I don't have one handy, but in the notebook, I have a lot of accountability tools in there. Plus, I tell people, I can see your progress. I can see how many times you get in. I can see how much of the course you've done. And I tell people that, I'm kind of teasing them, but not. But I tell people that because, well, hopefully you got a sense for, in this hour, I'm big on accountability, but, and I have people hold me accountable, you know, so it's not just the other way around. But if you're going to take the class, I really want you to succeed. I'm not trying to just take your money. I want you to get out of the class going, oh my gosh, that helped my business so much. Or, you know, one of my friends said, you saved our marriage, you know, whatever. But I want it to make a difference. And so that's why I hold you accountable and are like, hey, Mary, you've only logged in 20% of the time. You're not going to get the benefit out of the class if you don't do the work. And then we have a private Facebook group where you can ask the questions, or sometimes I go in and do a live where I answer some of the questions that come up after the webinar. So I'm answering them for everybody and that kind of thing. There is a discount code that's good till the end of, let's see, today's Tuesday to the end of Thursday. And you have to enter this code, webinar 91, which is for 9/1, September 1. And that'll save you $150 whether you choose the whole payment or break it up into 6 payments. Okay. The last thing I want to tell you is if you go to my website, now I'm changing the URL because I don't like this URL, but it's called The Pay for Performance Expert. So you just spell it all out, thepayforperformanceexpert.com. And you will see on there an opt-in where you can get that staff meeting agenda that I talked about. And there's a video that'll go with it that describes why I do each section. So I have a strategy for every section in our staff agenda. And anyway, you can go in there and download it and get that video. Okay, I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to answer questions. Oh, Denise, who has been through this class. Okay, so here's the policy. Take before and after pictures of all move-in and out cleans. For afternoon move-in cleans, management sends a message about pictures. Employee doesn't respond to it until management on Tuesday, 4 days later, after the weekend, sends a reminder group message about pictures being mandatory. How do we get them in a timely manner? So, Denise, it is that would be like anything else to me, is if you make it important to the employees, they'll get it done. So how do you make it important? You know, you could do it a lot of ways. So there's different ways you can do it. If they don't get it to you in whatever you have determined as a timely manner, and that needs to be defined what that is, you know, to allow for afternoon cleanings, you might say within 24 hours or whatever. But to get them to do that, you have to define exactly what you expect. And then you can go two routes. You can write them up. So you can like go through the disciplinary process if they don't do it. And for us, that is a verbal warning, a written warning, another written warning, they're in probation, you know, so forth. You can go down that path, and that's kind of the slap on the wrist. You need to do what I asked you to do, kind of retribution. Or you can do a reward side where, I don't know, you can do all kinds of things. You can say, for example, we pay more for deep cleanings if they get an excellent or good score. So you could say, on move-in, move-out cleans, if you don't get the before and after pictures to us, you know, whatever, you get $2 less an hour or whatever. I like doing it this way. I like doing it as a bonus and not a takeaway. So, you know, for me, I might pay more for move-in, move-outs if they got it to me as prescribed, like within the 24 hours. Or it could be, you know, you enter them in a raffle for every time. But that's like saying, see, the thing about something like that is that's like saying it's optional when you would do like a raffle or something. And this is required. So I would probably tend, with this scenario, I would probably tend to go either the way of, here's your move in, out, move out hourly rate. You get your pictures to me and you get a excellent score or whatever, you get this extra amount. Or I would do the write-up. So I would do an either or on that. Okay, let's see what else we have. Yeah, the trainee checking somebody else's work. that we do that. So in our training program, at the very end of training, they do their houses by themselves and we check off. But right before they do that, they do a QA check with, well, I don't have a field manager there anymore, so we can't do this like we used to, but it used to be part of our training. Every time we'd have, one of the very last things they did was they'd go with the field manager and they would do a quality check. And it is really a great teaching lesson to have them look from that critical eye. Oh, thanks, Denise. Kim, employees won't keep in touch even over the weekend as remote, as we have changes up to the date for Mondays. So Kim, so now I have a policy, and really everybody should probably have this policy, in that I don't, I'm not paying people to work on their off hours, including evenings and weekends. So we are not communicating with people over the evening or weekend. However, we have taught people that they need to always understand we're changing the schedule on the fly. So on Friday afternoon, we might be changing Monday's schedule, and we don't necessarily communicate that to them. I mean, it's courtesy. If we make a last minute change, it is courtesy that we'll go in our staff Facebook group and say, hey, double check your schedule for Monday. We made several changes. But again, we're always trying to keep that within work hours. If not, we would schedule it for first thing Monday morning, and you can schedule it to appear so that we're not bugging them on the weekend. But I'm not sure if I'm understanding you correctly, but I don't ask our employees to keep in touch with us. They know what's expected. They're required to, know their schedule. We don't babysit and say, hey, I just want to make sure you know what's on your schedule. We don't do that. They know how to log in, see their schedule. If we make any last minute changes, sure, out of courtesy, we may try to say last thing on Friday or first thing on Monday, hey, double check your schedule. But yeah, hopefully that answered your question. Okay. Well, thanks you all for hanging in there. I'm going to stop